What is your American outlook as we go into 2021?
Well, Tom, very near term, we think we will be getting some softening. The data have held up remarkably well so far in the face of the drop-off in fiscal support, in the face of the increase in the virus. But the virus taking off in the second half of November has not yet had a chance to show up in the data. We do expect to see consumer spending soften over the next several months. That will be holding GDP growth for the fourth quarter down to, we think, below consensus. Consensus is around 4%. Our number is closer to 2.5%. Then in the first quarter, continued at a sluggish pace, picking up a bit. We are assuming that we will get some fiscal support by around the end of the year. That does help the first quarter. But the virus is clearly going to be a drag. So sort of these offsetting forces.
Do you and your team, Dr. Hooper, have a vector on, say, claims or on the unemployment rate? I would say everything's coalesced down to 3 moving averages in the trend, right down to a given point, say, on claims. Can you go this way or that way on the direction of jobless claims?
I'd expect them to be picking up over the next several months. We wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of an uptick in the unemployment rate as we get into the really end of the winter, and I mean we are beginning to see some negative effects from the really impressive spread of the virus at this point. Not what we saw late last winter. But certainly enough to give us a bit of an uptick there. Before the fiscal support begins to come back in, and certainly before the vaccines give us a lift.
Peter, that's really critical. I want to come back to the stimulus in a second, but let's assume that we don't have much more of a stimulus come January, because Mitch McConnell and Janet Yellen and what could happen in Georgia. Is there a wave of bankruptcies that could come early 2021, and are we ready for it?
Yes, there are bankruptcies. There's potentially evictions. There's and certainly some further job loss. So I think all of this is going to be weighing on things through the winter months, if you're assuming no further fiscal support at all, I think we're looking at a negative on GDP growth into the first quarter.
Okay, will we get stimulus, and how big could we get in terms of stimulus?
Well, it's interesting. We're anticipating some of this money that the Fed has not used, perhaps going into a package here. The bipartisan discussions in Washington in the last few days suggesting we could get something on the order of 900 billion to a trillion magnitude, well short of what the Democrats have been asking for, but I think in excess of what the Republicans in the Senate have been willing to concede to this point. I think that would be important. If we get something of that magnitude, it would certainly be helpful.
Peter, this is way too narrow for someone of your esteem, but I've got to go here because it's the question of the moment. Has Deutsche Bank calculated out the most effective unemployment check from the government? Is it $300, $600, $1,200 as before? Do you have a number that gives a best outcome?
Well, yeah, I think the size that we had before, what perhaps wasn't needed. You saw a substantial increase in overall household saving. The point is there are 5 million people who have lost their jobs since this since this this virus came about, and they are going to be needing support. It perhaps doesn't need to be quite at the level it was initially. I don't have the magic number, but certainly some support is going to be needed going forward. I think we're going to need PPP support as well. We want to keep not just the unemployed, but keep people close to their jobs via PPP.
Peter, we talk about scarring, which is, what we call something that will be lost in the economy. But because the vaccine has arrived so quickly, how much will we actually limit that scarring to the U.S. economy?
I think this has gone on long enough to say there will be some scar. There's going to be some permanent changes in activity, some shifts, various forms of consumer and other activity is not going to go back all the way to where we were. So there will have to be some significant changes. People will have to retrain. But certainly the vaccine coming on this quickly does help significantly. I mean, when we made the assumption in September about when we would be back to herd immunity, it was perhaps by the end of this year, by the end of next year. We're now roughly 6 months ahead of that schedule, at least, we think, and that does certainly help.